Dobry ranok. This is a Ukrainian shirt, so I have to speak Ukrainian. You give me a Lithuanian shirt, I will learn how to say good morning and thank you in Lithuanian. It's okay, it's all I have. But maybe next year when I come back, I'll be able to stand up here with a Lithuanian shirt and say good morning in Lithuanian. That would be something. Okay, I thank him for asking who is in the audience, your experience levels, the different roles. I normally do that myself, so I'm very happy it saves some time around that. I'm going to give you a little warning about this talk that I'm going to give you. It's a hard talk. The people who were in my advanced Agile class, could I just see you raise your hands? Some of them are here. If you see any of these people around, I know there are more of them here, you could ask them some more questions about this. This material is very difficult. It's the material that I use to consult from. It's the material I use to understand what's going on. So it's not for beginners, really. But it's not for programmers. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that I'm showing you a window into thinking about our professions, all of our professions, in a different way. And for the first time, the people who the first time this is going to go past, just think this is a set of words going to rub a little bit off the glass of the window so you can peek and you go like, what was all of that? But try to pick up a few words out of it. If you've been around for a long time, you'll recognize more and more. For those who were in the advanced class, we spent 2 days, and as they can tell you, we barely got the window open. If you've heard this talk before, or if anybody's actually read any of my books, use this as an opportunity to put your head further through the window and look at this world that I'm going to describe. What I'm going to try to do, what I've been doing for about the last 20 years, is trying to understand something about what you might say, what are the laws of physics around designing in teams? Not just software, designing in teams. Now, software development is a pure mental activity. And as such, it's very sensitive to the mood of the people. If two people hate each other, the ideas don't go between and nothing happens. So it's not that software development is like engineering or is like theater or is like anything else. Software development is unique. It's a pure activity in itself. When we understand sort of the laws of physics that drive the way people work with software, actually, software development becomes the reference point, and other things are like software development. So we could take our understanding of what happens in software design teams and apply them in business design teams, marketing design teams, advertising, startups, entrepreneurships, all kind of other activities. So that's what I'm going to do. It's going to go quite fast. There are 5 chapters in the talk. So I'll introduce the chapter and I'll give you some of the content and some of the insights out of each of those chapters. Going to start off, I called this Getting Past the Wimpy Agile. So I gave a talk some years ago. I said, Agile is for wimps. Now, for those of you who don't know what a wimp is in English language, it's a person with no courage and who falls over and can't lift heavy barbells, and that kind of a person is called a wimp. So Agile is for wimps. Why is Agile for wimps? Well, the Manifesto itself invites, excuse me one second, so I can see this, invites what we would call wimpiness. How does it do that? Well, here's the Agile Manifesto. It says, focus on individuals and interactions as opposed to processes and tools. So, of course, yay, I never liked processes in the first place. No more processes for me. Whee! Okay. Second one says, make sure that you have working software. Don't spend so much time on that documentation. Woo, woo, woo. I hate documentation. Dump the documentation. I love this Agile stuff. Let's go. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Yo, I'm done when I'm done, and I never have to say when I'm going to be done. Boss. Woot, woot. Love this Agile stuff. Responding to change over following a plan. No plans, no project managers, no architects. Where do I sign up? Let's go. Love this stuff. So, that's wimpy Agile. And you get actually you get pretty good results. That's the amazing stuff. Wimpy Agile, you get actually pretty good results, okay? But that's not what the good people do. So I'm going to show you what the good people do. And when you're done, you'll see that the things we put into the Agile Manifesto are pretty good starter strategies for handling the laws of physics that come with team-based mental design. But when you understand the larger set of law of physics, it gives you more freedom of movement to change and do things that are different. So I'll explain to you in one of the sections some interesting strategies that I see people doing that are not written in the Agile literature at all. They look like they're the opposite of what's in the Agile literature, but they work great when you understand how come they work and where to apply them and things like this. So as I go along, this is like the underlying stuff, and then I invite you to think about the Agile Manifesto with some of the Agile habits and practices, and you can see that they land quite nicely on the way these laws of physics work. So, okay, what I've got on this next slide is I say, what is software development? Or in fact, what is team-based design at all? What would it be if we didn't use analogies and metaphors and things like that? What we see is we see people. That's the first thing. We see people. They're doing one of three things. They're either inventing something, they're communicating something, or they're deciding something. Okay, it's the only things they ever do. That's all you get. Those three things. As you can see, they're very human, mental, social kinds of activities. So if we want to get better at this team design stuff, we need to get better at these three things. So this tells us exactly where to focus our efforts. We're in a situation where these people are solving a problem. Now the problem, they don't understand. Why don't they understand it? Well, they were just given the problem. Of course they don't understand it. And the problem keeps changing out from underneath them. They're creating a solution. They don't understand the solution. Why not? Well, they just got started on it. So of course they don't understand it yet. And the solution keeps changing out underneath them. And then they're expressing their ideas in some sort of a strange language. And typically they don't really understand the language, and the language keeps changing out from underneath them also. So everything is changing all the time. The computer is unforgiving of error. So it doesn't matter what you do, it'll just go. Now, it turns out that this line is underlined because if you're in an engineering profession, if you're working with chemistry, biology, laws of physics, civil engineering, or computers, you have an interpreter that's unforgiving of error. If you're working in human activities, marketing, theater, business, things like that, the interpreters are other humans, and they're pretty rude, but they are actually somewhat forgiving of error. So this sentence is different depending on what you're doing. Each person is making decisions. Each person's decisions has got consequences that hit other people. So every decision has got economic consequences that roll through the organization, and we are short on resources. We don't have enough people, time, money, all that stuff. Okay, so this on one slide is the problem we're wrestling with. This is the situation we're in, and we're going to see where we go on this. My friend Jerry Derbier drew this nice little origami, folded this nice little origami thing, which I use as a basis. So we've got these sort of 5 chapters. Here are the 5 chapters that I'm going to go through. Craft, cooperative game, flow management, knowledge acquisition, and self-awareness. So I'm actually going to start with the self-awareness one. And what I put in here is the fact that everything we talk about is theory. I'll give you the theory of why things should work. When you read technique books, when you read process books, always they idealize the human. The human is somehow some perfect instance of a product manager, product owner, programmer, tester, whatever. But in fact, on your project, that's not true. You really have a real person. And the person's personality doesn't match the idealization that you need. So in real life, we deal with real people, and the chemistry between real people is very bizarre. It's unpredictable, it's strange. Every time you add a person to a project, remove a person to a team, anything, it changes in unpredictable ways. So this first thing is a reminder that we're dealing with individual human people that are all different. Inside this chapter, I also put this notion of self-awareness. At an individual level, people become aware of who they are, how they work, their strengths, their weaknesses. But on good teams, the team becomes self-aware. The team members learn, this is this person's strong point, weak point, this is how we cover for each other. and so on. There are people who, there are teammates know that they get angry at a certain thing, and actually when this person starts to get angry, the other team members will take over the situation so this person doesn't have to like explode. So that's an example of team awareness. And everything we talk about, reflective improvement, what to do differently, getting together and talk about these things, fits into this area of self-awareness. So I'm not going to say much more about that, but remember that everything else that gets said is theoretical. What happens on a real project is real people who are unpredictable and weird. I'll jump quickly through the next easiest one is craft. And in the side of this craft, I'm going to use these three words and these three symbols. Shuhari. Now, shuhari, that's Japanese words. These are Chinese kanji symbols. And this comes in from the 16th century Japanese theater, no theater, through martial arts. But it turns out it applies pretty much everywhere. Every technique, every skill that everybody learns, people go through these three stages. The first stage, the shoe stage, and it's very nice. It rhymes with shoes, so I get to make shoe jokes. You can make other new shoe jokes if you want. But at the shoe stage, for you people who are beginning, you ask for a technique that works. You say, don't, even if you know this stuff, I know all this stuff, and still when I'm starting, I say, don't give me 5 techniques. I know there are 5 techniques. I can't learn 5 techniques. Give me one technique. So you get one technique and you copy it, and you try to get one technique good. Now, the bad news is that technique isn't always applicable. So after a while, you go, okay, that doesn't always work. Give me another technique. Then give me another technique. And now you're in the second stage, collecting techniques. When you get to the third stage, you don't use techniques anymore because it's all integrated in your body. It's a full body experience. You see, you hear, you move so fast. Every moment, every situation is different. What you do is different every time. Now, there's a fundamental conflict between re people and shoe people, because the shoe people want one answer that's going to work in a broad set of contexts. The re people will give you a different answer every instant. So I'll give you an example of re-level work in Agile. And I get really, really freaked out by people who point big black glass camera eyes at me. My brain stops. Wait! So she's got a picture of me doing this very close up. We'll see what that one looks like. But seriously, I don't know. I just like, stop talking. Stop thinking, keep talking. That's the problem. Okay. So I was at Nokia. I think I can say the name of this company. It won't cause any embarrassment. But they had a Scrum team. They had the UI designers in Helsinki, and they had the developers in Beijing. And they said, we have a problem. The people in Beijing won't make a sprint commitment because they say the UI people keep changing the design too often. Oh, so you guys, consultants, any of you, you go, oh, I know what to do about that. What you do is you freeze the UI design every 2 weeks so that the people in Beijing have got a stable base to work on, they can do their design and so on. Okay? They said, yeah, but we actually sent the UI designers to Beijing, and then the people in Beijing didn't have any trouble. And I said, oh, that's completely different. Of course, because when they're present, the programmers in Beijing see them every day. They're in conversation. If the UI design is changing, they learn about it early. They see why, they see how, they can talk about the implications. It doesn't disturb them. Whereas if they're in different places, they get an email in the morning, the UI design's changed, it blows up their work, they get upset and everything else. So here you see the same company, the same assignment, the same team, the same everything. All we did was move these people from here to here, and the recommendation changes completely. So that's re-level recommendations. Okay? The other thing about craft is we need to understand that each person is in a professional development career. A craft profession means that you never stop learning. When I go around the world, especially at least for me in the United States, I get very upset with the programmers who've been programming for 20 years, and they're still doing stuff like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. They don't recognize that programming has changed every 5 years. I learned programming in 1970, then I relearned it in 1980, and I relearned it in 1990, then 95, 2000, 2005, and I've missed a beat, so I'm like way behind. I don't do any of the Hadoop, I don't do cloud, I don't do MapReduce, I don't do all kind of stuff that I would need to do if I were going to be a modern programmer. So this changes all the time. So there's some different craft professions, and you should think about yourself as being in a craft profession as an honorable thing. It's actually a difficult thing, where you learn and learn and learn and learn, and you never stop learning. You just deepen your mastery of your craft. We each have a medium of expression. If it's like C++ is very different than Ruby. If you're managing people, here's the weird thing. If you're a project manager or a scrum master, your medium is people. Most of us were not trained to deal with people. We spent 7 or 10 years of our lives mastering programming, and suddenly we're swapped into a different craft profession where the medium is people. So that's not very fair for the people that we're managing, because we're not trained. But okay, think about this. So think about the medium that you're working in, and what does it mean to develop mastery of this craft? I have to keep moving. There's an International Consortium for Agile that I helped found, and I'm now an advisor. I'm on the advisory board to this, even though I helped to found it. And this group is making learning roadmap for every skill area. So the little red thing down at the bottom, you could think of like the certified Scrum Master. It's about 2 days of material. It's called Fundamentals of Agile, and it's encoded and written down. What would anybody in principle bother to learn about Agile to understand it? So it's about 2 days. The International Consortium for Agile doesn't teach any courses. It's a course accreditation agency. So if you have a course and you want it accredited by this, and then you would give out at this point after this 2 days the certified IC Agile Professional badge, which is about synonymous with the certified Scrum Master. If you know the PMI thing, the PMI ACP, these are about equivalent. But that's only the beginning of the learning journey, because it's a craft profession. And so we've got written already, you can take a look. No, we're starting to work on the business analysis, which we call value management. Business analysis, Agile business analysis doesn't make a lot of sense as a term, but value management does. So value management, project management, coaching and facilitation, programming, testing. We're going to go to executive leadership is going to be the next track that's built. So already completed are the coaching and facilitation, programming and testing. So you can go online to IC Agile and you can read what it would take to about 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks of courses in each of these specialty areas. You can see what the learning objectives are. And if you want to make a course and get it accredited, that's a fine thing to do. The next, now we're starting on the more difficult parts of this, and that's this idea of a game. So I'm going to give you this one. This is very deep. I can only give you just at the surface a sketch of this. But if you think that what we're doing in a software project or one of these team design activities, we're trying to deliver something together. This is like playing a game. It's a complicated game. And so I'm going to just run you through the different kinds of games very briefly. One of the essence of these kinds of games is you have a position. You go to your project. The current state of your project is the position of your team on this game board. So you look at it, you go, that's not a very good position to be in. And so you make some moves. You get some more requirements, or you write some code, or you deliver something. Whatever you do, you hire somebody, you move people around, you make a move in the game. You collect strategies about how to move in the game. And the cool thing is that you use different strategies for different projects. The positions don't repeat. So here's a very quick sketch of different kinds of games. There are competitive games and cooperative games. There are games that have a fixed endpoint, like chess or tennis. You can always tell where the game ends. There are games that don't necessarily have fixed endpoints, like when kids are playing some wrestling match, or when you play poker. Sometimes you don't always stay till you run out of money. It's time to go, you know. It's late at night, and your significant other calls you up and says, honey, it's quite late. Don't you think you should be coming home? You know, and so you say, oh, well, okay, so you have to go home. So you end the play just arbitrarily. There's an interesting category of games called infinite games. Infinite games are games that should never end. When a corporation is running, it's trying never to finish. When you're managing your career, you make moves in a career that maximize your pathway forever, even if, and we see this sometimes, people will maximize their career to the detriment of the project. So we see people, programmers, choosing technologies that are not suited for the project. Hurts the project, but it's good for the person's resume. So they do that, right? And we've seen that over the decades. If we come down the other side, the cooperative version of wrestling would be jazz music. And I don't have any deep insights on how to run a project using jazz music. But the interesting thing is on the bottom there, we've got all kinds of human activities of which software development is just one. And this is cool because if we learn the properties of this kind of a game, we can apply them in different areas. So in fact, I started in software development, but the stuff I talk about is being used in entrepreneurial startups. Lean startup is what this area is called. And then if we put software on there, the thing that's interesting is that IT systems look more like open-ended games that intended to close. A system just stops sometimes. But product line management looks like an infinite game. It just goes on forever. So you come up with an intermediate release of your product in order to keep it alive while you buy time to do a new version of a product. You could imagine the scrambling going on at Nokia when Apple's iPhone first came out and they had to react to it. Still reacting to it. Okay, so summarizing this, we've got the 3 moves in this game. So learn how to invent, learn how to communicate, learn how to decide. We could spend a lot of time on that. I'm not going to. It's just topics. Take that home, think about it, look at your project, look at people inventing, communicating, deciding, and try to think about how to get better at those 3 moves. The problem with software development is that there are 2 conflicting sub-goals. One goal is called deliver the system, that's all right, but then we have to live with it. So the next round of the game, we're stuck with whatever position we put ourselves in at the end of this game. So if you hurry up, you develop a system, you deliver it quick, you were in a hurry, it's crap, bad architecture, bad tests, and now your lead developers go off and you have to have new developers. You're in a really bad position for the next round of the game. So you could win one round of the game and you're in a bad position for the next one. So we see that you apply resources that don't help this delivery but are set for another game in the future. Now this is really tough because we have a finite bounded problem called deliver the system, and taking resources are an unbounded problem called this very vague thing called and please set up in an advantageous position for the next game. So more tests, more architecture, more refactoring, more training for junior developers, more documentation, more all this stuff. Unbounded, you could keep doing that, nearly forever. So it's the cause is the tension that we see around design quality and documentation. It's about setting up for the next game. And the cool part is the situations are never going to repeat. So don't ever think that you've mastered this thing called running software projects because the technology keeps changing, the market keeps changing, the people keep changing. Now, one of the things that I like to do is to look for strategies that are complete opposites. In the class, we talked about one where, in general, you like to put people in the same room. We found one where we took the lead designer and we actually moved him upstairs into the far end of the building so nobody would talk to him. There was a time when that was the right strategy. So these strategies are very interesting, how they keep changing. And it means you have to stay alive and stay awake and stay creative. All right. Just going through a little bit more out of this chapter called Cooperative Game. Here's a little chart just to show you sort of the number of different game situations you might find yourself in where the strategies would be different. I picked 2 dimensions. I picked the number of people you're coordinating and what I call criticality, or roughly speaking, how many people die if something goes wrong. And there's like 7 or 11 or 17 different dimensions, and I just picked 2. The one on the bottom is the one I focus on the most, and that's how many people are involved. How many people do we have to coordinate? Because the coordination and communication structures change fundamentally as you go from left to right. 6 people, put them in a room, let them talk to each other, you're kind of about done. If you're 100 people or 200 people, that doesn't work anymore. You have different floors, different cities, different cultures. By now you've got different time zones. All kinds of things are different. So the fundamental strategies have to change. What this means is don't look for one process or one methodology to fit all projects. It can't happen. It's a fundamental impossibility. And that implies also, of course, Scrum, because Scrum is really only defined up to about, I'll be generous and say about 30 people. So when you hit 200 people, it's not Scrum anymore. It's something else that may borrow the same 5 letters for marketing reasons. All right, on the criticality, we would expect validation, verification, testing to be fundamentally different. So if someone's going to die, you do things differently than if you're doing something for your kid's soccer league or it's a field test or something like that. And I just have these arrows. I have some projects, trajectories I was on or interviewed. A 2-person project, it became a 100-person project. They didn't think about how different it was, and so they had a massive project failure. I was an advisor to the Central Bank of Norway in 1997-98. And we had a project that fit that red arrow, and I was just tracking where it was as it changed over time, just as a reminder that the ways that we would operate would shift as we moved from box to box. We didn't make big, drastic changes, but we had little shifts. Talking now about cooperative game, we have to talk about communication. This is a very interesting little curve I'll go through just briefly. And it's talking about the communication efficiency or effectiveness, how easy it is to get an idea out of one person's head into another person's head. And at the top, I've got 2 people at the whiteboard. So if you look at 2 people at a whiteboard, you have real-time question and answer. You've got facial gestures, hand gestures. Draw on the whiteboard. Put timing between the gestures and the speaking. All of that's present. Person moves back, moves forward. As we go away from that situation, as you go to a telephone, then you lose all of the visual information. You lose all that timing between gestures and speaking. When you go to an electronic medium like chat, you lose the vocal inflection, vocal timing. That's all interesting. That's with real-time question and answer. The interesting part to me is the other curve, where you don't have real-time question and answer. How do we work now? What suggests itself from this theory is that you video 2 people talking at the whiteboard. And at the time that I was coming up with this about, I don't know, 14 years ago or something, it was all videotape, and we were concerned what to do about documentation. But now, 10, 15 years later, what's interesting is everybody's got a camera in them, and the servers are big. So people are now using this for the same project anytime that somebody can't be present. You have asynchronous communication between people, just like we like chat, voicemail, email, because you don't have to be physically present at the same time. People are now using video of a person at a whiteboard as a similar kind of a thing. So, for example, time zones, 2 different time zones. You video the stand-up meeting, or you video 2 people discussing a design idea, put it on the server, the other people come in, look at the video, 5 minutes. If you have a sales executive or a specialist who makes a customer visit or comes back for a conference, and they have an idea, they want to communicate, but they're very busy people, maybe your product owner is a very busy person, you could video that person explaining the idea and then stick it on the disk, and then other people could look at it. So we use this to come up with new ideas for communicating between people. All right, just summarizing the people, there's 3 sort of questions, 3 sort of topics here about people and ideas on projects. The first one is you want to make it easy so that people can see that something needs attention. So you want to organize the project so it's easy to see what's happening. And in the Agile world, we see the burn-up charts and the burn-down charts and the backlogs and a lot of things that try to make it easy to see what's going on. The second thing, you have to pay attention to pride in work. Do the people care enough to even bother to say that they noticed that something was wrong? Do they like each other enough to even bother to say that something is wrong, right? That's your problem. I'm sorry. Doesn't matter to me. You're stuffed. Ha ha. Okay? That you fix that. You have to deal with that. And then finally, the mechanics of communication. Do we have it easy to and effectively transmit the information? All right. That's that. I'm going to go on to the next harder piece. This one is, I think I only have 2 slides on this. And here's an interesting idea. People say, well, designing things is fundamentally different than manufacturing, because in manufacturing, you always do the same thing over and over. If you're putting doors on cars, you're always putting doors on cars. So one door looks the same as the next door. When I design, everything is different. Well, that's okay. But there's a shift, this little shift that's at the top. Design suddenly looks a lot like manufacturing if the unit of item that you're talking about is a decision, an individual decision. So in car factories in the 50s and the 60s in the US, they said it doesn't cost anything to have internal inventory, the car parts, the doors, the tires, the bumpers, stack them up to the ceiling. Somebody will buy them sooner or later. I don't care. So that's internal inventory. And what Toyota did with their lean stuff was to show that you could do better. You could get better results if you shrink the internal inventory and you have single piece flow, continuous flow. The cars come out faster, it's cheaper, faster, less stress. You can change the manufacturing line and all kind of good things happen. The same thing in a design activity is if you have a lot of decisions in play. So I want you to imagine for a moment, everybody in your organization is waiting on another person to make a decision. If you make a picture of who is waiting on whom for which decisions, you get a dependency graph that looks a lot like a manufacturing flow line. And it turns out has all the same properties of a manufacturing flow line. As these decisions ripple through the network and people make these decisions, you get the same net effect as if car parts are going through a car manufacturing plant. The math comes out exactly the same. And the behaviors and results are exactly the same. So it's really, really interesting. The kind of thing that we see here, and I assume you've been reading that slide, so you can see that, is that we get these piles of decisions that lump up in one place or another place. So probably you can think of the person whose inbox is full and people are waiting on that person to make a lot of decisions. In manufacturing, they call that the bottleneck station. I don't happen to like the phrase. In an organizational sense, I call that group the pace car because they set the speed of the whole organization and it's less offensive. But in manufacturing, they call it the bottleneck station. And programmers like to think that they're the bottleneck station, but when I go around the world, I tend to find that UX designers are more often than not are the bottleneck. If you think about the UX designers, not enough, they're serving 3 teams, everybody's waiting on them. That's the sign of the bottleneck station. Sometimes it's the business analysts, sometimes it's the testers, sometimes it's the programmers. So there's a bunch of interesting things that happen here. Your processes should be fundamentally different depending on whether the bottleneck station is here or there. Fundamentally different processes depending on where the bottleneck is. Again, you cannot have one process or methodology for all situations. The next thing that's interesting is this looking at lean manufacturing as a model for what we're doing finally takes the emphasis away from just the programmers and allows us to talk about optimizing across the organization. So for me, this is a very welcome piece of information. I'm tired of just the programmers trying to get better and better and better, but the organization doesn't get better. We want the organization to get better. So we can apply all this stuff. It's called flow management. And it happens that the best strategies are coming out of Toyota and lean. So we talk about lean manufacturing, lean design, lean software development, Kanban, all of these kinds of things to borrow from this. And so here I just have these together. You could imagine that in this situation, when you finally get very small requests from the market, very small requests to the programmers, very small amounts of code getting checked in, tested, debugged, fixed, very small and frequent showing to the users to correct the design ideas, the requirements, very small deliveries to the market. We can balance the flow through the whole organization, and we have lots of little requests. It's much more peaceful, much more rapid, much more effective. So think about it. You probably have an organization like this. You'd like to end up with an organization like this, okay? The final chapter, knowledge acquisition. This is the most difficult. We spend a lot of time of this in my advanced class. For me, this is the most interesting just because it's the most recent. So the Cooperative Game, I worked out about 1998. The lean stuff was about 2002, 3, 4. This thing only sort of came in about 2007, 2008, so it's only about 5 years old. So you guys are like right up to date with the industry, so to speak there. And it's a matter of looking at design as a knowledge acquisition activity. Now, of course, we have to ship the product. The problem is that when we know the most about the product is right after we've shipped it. Right after we've shipped it, we finally have the best understanding of what's the problem we're supposed to solve and what's the technology we're supposed to use and how we can make a solution right when it's too late to do anything about it. So what I want to do is now just kind of walk through some time and cost things and show you a little bit how your strategies can be interesting and different if you understand this curve. So what I've got here is I have time on the bottom axis, and I have knowledge on the vertical axis. But we're going to take a waterfall type Big Bang integration situation first. I'll put a little red line up there so that we're paying people, so the cost is going up over time. And everybody's working away and they're talking and typing, and it's not like they don't learn anything. But the moment where the real learning happens is when they integrate all their pieces, right? The Big Bang integration at the end. And then miraculously it works, or more likely it doesn't work, whichever way. It's a surprise. And so the learning happens at that moment of integration. And that's not a pretty curve because we've been paying all this cost and not learning stuff. So the learning is running way behind the cost. What we want to do is to learn how to strategize so that it's the other way around. So we do this, now we're going to say continuous integration, early integration, lots of little experiments. So every time a programmer checks in codes, every time you run your test, every time you show something to a user or prototype, every time you deliver something to the market, you get a surprise. What we want is lots of little surprises carefully stacked up to maximize the knowledge that we get, so we get lots of knowledge early so that we don't have surprises late. No late surprises. Now, a lot of Agile people, and actually before Agile, it was in object-oriented territory, would say fail early, fail fast. I hate that word. I hate that. I watch the faces of the business owners when you say we're going to fail early and fail often and fail fast. I go, how can you say that in front of those people? That just hurts me. So I never say that. I don't ever want to fail. Failing's miserable. I've done it on occasion. It really stinks. I want bad news early. All bad news early, so that I have the maximum amount of time to adjust, so I can succeed in the end, right? No late bad news. That's the motto, right? So we want bad news early. That's just asking for information about things early on. So we get, ideally, hopefully we get a knowledge acquisition curve that looks like this, so we have no late bad news. So we've got a couple of phases to the project, if you will. There's a kind of a knowledge acquisition, risk reduction period. And then there's a business value period where you just can add the business. Wouldn't it be nice if the programmers say, yeah, we got it, no problem, any feature, any order, any time, we got it, right? Then the business would be able to choose in what sequence to do that. Now, I know that that's what the Scrum literature, the general Agile literature says, but that's in fact doesn't match reality. That's not the way the world works. The world is not that kind. So this is a case with this stuff. If you read the book called Lean Startup, they say almost exactly this stuff. So here we've got the same curve. We've got the knowledge acquisition period. I actually split it into 3 periods these days, but I'll just for 2 for right now. Something where the dominant issue is knowledge acquisition and sometime where the dominant issue is delivering value, okay? So you start off and you say, okay, this is cool. We understand everything. Boss, there's no risks. We can just go give us the highest value item first. We'll build it. Then they start building and they go, oops, pause. That thingy didn't work the way we thought it was going to work. The APIs don't work, scaling. We hired the wrong person. This person said they're a great tester, coder, designer. They're not. So you get all these surprises. If you're lucky, you could make explicit experiments to find this out. So you go business value, surprise, some kind of experiment. Let's do an experiment that doesn't deliver business value, but helps us deliver knowledge. So we'll talk about what some of those are. Then ideally, in the ideal case, if you're lucky, you stack up the delivery of business value so that the most valuable things come out first, and then you're polishing and trimming and adding small features and tweaking and tuning and making it just beautiful. We'll talk about the value of this in the trim the tail section in a minute. So what I observe in well-run teams is not that the business value just goes up like that, like the mythical Agile literature would indicate, but in fact it's got this wobbly shape as we go after risks, we go after value, we go after risks, we go after value. There are 4 buckets of risks or knowledge acquisition, if you will, that I observe. And the first one is business risk. This is where lean startups come in, get that book, understand that that crowd is really, really good. They're really hot these days. And what they say is, are we building the right thing? What is the smallest experiment you could make to tell if we're even building the right thing? And the classical example of this that may be true story, I don't know, I haven't seen it, I wasn't there at the time, but somebody had an idea to sell bird cages. And this was like in the early 2000s. early Google, and they said, I wonder if there's actually a market for bird cages. So they bought pay-per-click, and they said, buy bird cages. And then they had an empty web page behind, and they just counted clicks. People are clicking. Maybe there's a market for bird cages. I wonder what kind of bird cages they would like. So they have a landing page, and they've got big bird cages and small bird cages and bird cages and bird cages and metal bird cages and wood bird cages and stuff, right? And they don't have anything behind it. They just watch what people click on. And by adding detail to these things over a period of time, they figured out what people, and prices, change different prices, right? Different landing pages, different prices, find out how much people are willing to pay for bird pages. So now they figured out this is how much people are paying for this kind of a bird cage. So then they went into the bird cage manufacturing business, and they made those bird cages. Perfect example of business knowledge acquisition. It didn't even risk in that case, it was just knowledge acquisition. Social knowledge acquisition. You hired all these people. Can you get them to learn how to work together? That's knowledge acquisition. Risk reduction, have we got the right people? Knowledge acquisition, can we get them to learn how to work together? So I always give teams an easy assignment to start with, always. Because I want them to learn and debug the working together before I give them something hard. So that's using this curve. Technical risks, portability, scalability, APIs, all kind of things like that. Cost schedule knowledge. We see very occasionally people will do little tiny spot implementations through the system to be done to learn how much rework and how much upgrade has to be done to the architecture in order to get the thing done so that they can make a decent bid, decent schedule. We'll tell the story here of Tim Lister, who was co-author with Tom DeMarco on Peopleware book. Talked about a friend of his who was having a swimming pool built in the backyard. Called in 3 contractors. The first 2 came and gave him a bid. The third one came and said, I'm going to have to drill a core sample. So I'll drill down however many feet I need to drill down. And you have to pay for this. And the homeowner said, why would I pay for that? The other 2 guys just came and gave me a number. They didn't charge me anything. And his third contractor said, I don't understand how they could possibly give you a number because we don't know whether that's dirt under there or rocks under there. And the cost of digging is going to be very, very different if it's dirt than if it's rocks. So the homeowner was so impressed by this contractor that he was being thoughtful that he paid for the drilling. He goes, oh, those first 2 contractors must not be very good. They don't even do this drilling investigation before they put in a bid. That drilling, which cost extra, is a piece of cost schedule experimentation for knowledge acquisition, and it costs, and it doesn't deliver business value, but it does help you make sense of the curve so you can get good results at the end. The payoff for all of this is this little blue box at the end that I call the trim the tail section. This is when you run out of time. And so for people like me and Jeff Patton, if any of you know him, you assume you will run out of time. It is guaranteed you will run out of time. The only question is, what will you leave out when you run out of time? And what you want is to get all of the big interesting stuff in time and very deliberately let fall out the things that are uninteresting. And the example for me, the champions of this are Apple. And the example that I like to pick is the iPad. When the iPad came out first, it had no modem in it. All the Mac heads immediately rushed out and bought the iPad. They didn't care if it had a modem or not. When they had time, a few months later, they got the modem in, and then they shipped the version with the modem. Then more of the mass market bought it, and all the Mac heads went and bought a second iPad so they could have 2 iPads, one with and one without the modem. So Apple made money on both sides of that. So this moment here, this window is great. If you have a very large system, if you've got thousands of developers in multiple countries, you use this curve so that when you have an integration milestone that's very important, you can do that even under the assumption that everybody is behind schedule and nobody is done. If you've been following this curve, all of the main things are in place. You could do the integration test. If you're delivering, business people have a chance now to decide. It's not just a matter of work overtime or delay. You actually could do some fine-tuning on the feature set, on the cleanup, the documentation, the user interface, all kind of stuff, and decide exactly when to deliver. So that's very, very nice for the business people. Okay, so trim the tail is the payoff. Early knowledge acquisition, early delivery, and trim the tail at the end. That's what we're after. All right, I went through that extremely fast. I tried not to cut out anything. I tried not to talk too fast, but I didn't have time to go into depth. So here are these 5 areas, starting at the top this time, craft, working on skills in a medium. So take a look at your skills development programs. The one on the right, flow management, where the unvalidated decisions are your inventory. So take a look around at where is the bottleneck station or the pace car in your organization. Give them some love, give them some attention, load balance the entire organization, and shrink the number of decisions that are stuck inside the system. And you'll find that generally things will work better. Self-awareness, personalities, always be aware and alert that everything you read is going to be theoretical, that the actual people you have are unpredictable and you have to deal with the actual people that you have present. That's the magic. The first value of the Agile Manifesto says individuals and interactions are the heart of what's going on. And that's wonderful and mysterious and scary and dangerous all at the same time. Knowledge acquisition, we just looked at pay to learn so that you can trim the tail. That's very good. And the last one on here, the cooperative game, is about getting people to work well together and coming up for strategies to play the game. All right, so I got done. Actually, depending on whose clock you're looking at, I got done with some time to pick up some questions before we go to the lightning talks. Do we have a microphone for the people in the audience? And I will, in any case, maybe repeat the question. Do we have anybody with any questions? And it may work out best if I just repeat the question, but you can see. So I see this is, now I'm learning about real Lithuanians. Do you know, Finns have changed actually. The Finnish national character has changed in the last 14 years since cell phone came out. When I first went to Finland was 2000, and the room was like this. I asked if there are any questions, and we just went to lunch early because it was stone silent. But nowadays, when I go to Finland, they just talk like anybody. I don't know. It's like it's weird.
Maybe. Oh. How to ensure that testing package is not increasing? Because you have to retest. If you extend the functionality, you need to retest the old functionality.
Very good. So the question we did in the Advanced Agile course, we actually start up with our warm-up exercise, which is, why is Agile less efficient than Waterfall? And I got this question from an older Anderson consulting executive who, you know, at the end of a dinner one time, and he had enough drinks in him, he was feeling brave. He said to me, I don't understand you Agile guys. You get requirements, you do design, you program, you test. Then you change your requirements, and you change the design, then you change the program, and you test again. Then you change the requirements again, then you change the design, then you change the program, and you say, how do you ever get anything done? Why don't you just go get the requirements and do some analysis and do some design, program the sucker up, and then test it once? And I said, you're right. It's expensive. It's expensive. It costs. It costs. Why would we be that crazy to do all that rework? It is rework. I'm sorry, people. Refactoring is rework. You touch that same line of code again a second time, that's rework. You lose the math of the lean manufacturing rework thing. Hate it, hate it, hate it. We understand why manufacturing people hate it. Why do we do that? Well, so the answer is, it costs. Okay? You got that? Now, the next thing is to say, get the cost down. How do we get the cost down? Automate the hell out of it, right? Push button. Now you look at the literature, the cost of running the test goes up. Now we're in cooperative game. Those people who are in the advanced class just watch this, right? Now in a cooperative game, what are the strategies? It's called a two-tier testing thing. Two-tier review, two-tier testing, two-tier. It's a magic thing you do. You watch people, you look at the literature. The programmers cannot sit still for more than 30 seconds when tests are running, or 20 seconds. It's a small number. So when you get stuff done, boom, push a button. You subset the test to be something that's in the 20 to 30 second range so that the programmer doesn't go crazy, so they don't leave and go get a cup of coffee or whatever. And so you stage in a bigger set of tests. So you might even have 3 tiers, something that's under 30 seconds, something that's several minutes, 10 minutes, and maybe if you've got a giant test suite, it runs continuously, but maybe it runs overnight. So 2-tier testing, 3-tier testing, fully automated, gets you to the point that the testing cost isn't burdensome, but there is an extra testing cost. And why is it valuable? It's valuable because, what is it I want to go? I want to go after this. Right there, maybe right there, you could actually deliver the product, a skinny down product. Skinny down so it's barely usable, but guess what? You get revenue. So one of the reasons we do this is for knowledge acquisition. We debug the team, we debug the requirements, we debug the design, we debug the everything, right? We learn how to make the system, but the moment we deploy the system, we now have a self-funding project. The money that comes in pays for the development, and that is really awesome compared to the alternatives. So yes, it costs, A. 2, get efficient at it. 3, take advantage of the knowledge acquisition curve to recoup the cost. That's the why. Very nice question, thank you. Let's go for, see if there's another one. Yep. We may be all out of questions. People in
is there another one?
I'll give you guys another minute. Shy people.
I have one.
No, you don't. You're not Lithuanian anyway, because you talk. Let's try from the audience, just one more chance in case somebody wants to feel brave for a minute. Otherwise, Vitus is going to ask the last question of the session.
It's a nasty one.
You guys don't want to do that. Okay, Vitus, what you got?
You talked about bottlenecks. So my question is, it looks like if you do Agile pretty right, it moves your bottleneck out of development pretty often. Is that the case, what you see in the companies?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, and that's a good thing, because when we wrote the Agile Manifesto, it was a bunch of programmers sitting in the room, and what I'm embarrassed about is what we programmers, oh, you business people, we did you a disservice. We have no business people in the room when we were writing the Agile Manifesto, and we defined what is the life of the business person. We had no idea, but we defined a role called customer, and anything we didn't like in XP, we just dumped on the customer. So nobody can play the customer role because it's so overloaded that you can't do it. We're doing the same thing with Scrum, with the product owner. When I look at all the junk that gets dumped on the product owner, it's a bunch of programmers say, I don't want to do any of that stuff. It's yours. I don't know how you do that. That's go do that. Take a course from somebody here and whatever, okay? But the good news about this picture is we're talking about optimizing the organization. And that's really cool. So now we start to apply all this theory to make the organization more effective. And it is not a surprise that if the I'm going to have a new thought I'm going to just pass on to you. If the organization over an evolutionary time frame was load balanced at whatever speed it was, and we suddenly speed up the developer section, they drop out of the bottleneck area completely, and the bottleneck suddenly sits on someone else, and that would cause consternation and dismay inside the organization as they try to learn how to reload balance. So that's the long answer for yes. With that, I think I'm going to stop and turn over the time to the next set of speakers. Thank you.